今天非常高兴哈，今天能够在我们 TPCEA 哈摄影法人台湾摄影文化教育协会我们定期都有举办一些国际的试点哈，就是台湾的摄影团体里面唯一举办国际试点的。我们现在举办第2场，这一场是谈墨西哥，我们特别请到来自墨西哥的摄影家金劳先生、郝陆先生来跟我们分享。那我已经听过他的演讲，他非常精彩。然后这次我们特别指定了一个题目，也跟我们7月底在协会我们会办的一个摄影展有很大的关系，一个专题叫“贫穷与富裕”，共同邀请大家一起来思考这个主题。那我们今天就以最热烈的掌声来，谢谢，来欢迎。
Hello. First of all, thank you for coming. I'm sorry that my Chinese is not that good to do a presentation like this. I promise that maybe in some years I will be much better and proficient in my Mandarin. But thank you very much to people for inviting me for the association to do this talk. I think that in fact I'm here in Taiwan to do an exchange between Mexico and Taiwan photography. So this is part of the project, doing these exhibitions and these conferences to make a bridge between how we're conceiving Mexican photography, and to see how contemporary photography is perceiving in Taiwan. So I think that this topic that we're going to see right now, it's really interesting because it's a mix of social and economical factors, and how photographers seems that political factors and social economical factors intrude their gaze. The title that I chose was Rich Mexico, Poor Mexico. Of course, it's ironic. It's my work. It's ironic. I am a little ironic, and I think that this title says a lot about Mexican contemporarily. Just not Mexico. If we see all the capitalist countries and Latin American, especially countries like Brazil, Argentina, but especially Brazil and Argentina because they are the most big economies in Latin America, we can see a lot of factors that it's about this. It's about the richness and the poorness. It's about the contrast, about how it's the daily life of a country where there's super rich and people that it's in the first 10 or first 20 richest people in the world. But in the other hand, there's 30 million people in poverty. So this kind of big contrast that fortunately I don't see it in Taiwan. It's the day-on-day basis in countries like Mexico, Brazil, Argentina, Venezuela, Colombia. But Mexico, I think that is one of the countries that you can see this like in a really big matter. And so, do you?
Yeah, I can translate.
Thank you.
Okay. 那我大概就是很快的翻译一下，就是然后他现在在台湾，他想要做的一件事就是能够把墨西哥跟台湾这两边的摄影，就是能够做一个接轨，然后希望介绍给我们一些墨西哥的当代摄影，然后也希望就是从一个墨西哥人的角度来看台湾的当代摄影是什么样子。那今天他主要要讲的题目就是富墨西哥跟穷墨西哥，然后对他来讲，这其实是一个有一点讽刺的题目，因为在很多拉丁美洲国家，比如说墨西哥、巴西、委内瑞拉，都会看到这种很大的贫富差距。然后他说，就是在台湾好像没有这么严重，可是，在拉丁美洲国家，这其实是一个还蛮严重的一个社经问题，然后同时也是一个政治上的问题。
Can we change the next one? Thank you very much. Okay, the first word that we're gonna see is a series made by Daniela Rosell. Her work is called Rich and Famous, and it's really interesting because Daniela is the granddaughter of one of the political chiefs of the PRI, that is the political party that ruled Mexico for 70 years. This political party, it have parallels with other hegemonic powers in the world. Normally what happened is that they were a revolutionary political party that took power from a left fight, but with time it got corrupted, and the people that ruled in that system got super rich. Not all of them, but a lot of them. It's interesting, Daniela is the granddaughter of one of the top chiefs of this political party leaders. Her grandfather was the governor of a region that it's called Tabasco, like the sauce. Yes, and so she's really rich. She have a lot of money, and she grew up in these kind of houses that is like this California kind of house. It's interesting because in this house, in fact, it was made the picture Romeo and Julieta, where Leonardo DiCaprio is one of the stars, and because that's the crazy thing about Mexico. There's a lot of part of Mexico that is super rich, and it's like houses like this where you can see like a lot of excesses that mostly are part of an heritage of the capitalist policies and from petroleum, because Mexico is one of the top, with Venezuela, it's one of the top of, petroleum producers in the world. So what was really interesting about Daniela's work was that actually she said to her friends and her cousins, all right, let's do a photo series where I'm gonna take photos of you girls doing what you normally do, your daily life, all right? So they were like, all right, this is a playground. So they were really naive that what was Daniela really doing, because Daniela was documenting all these excesses and all these breaches. In this photo, for example, this is one of Daniela's best friend, like lying here, like in all this richness, and you can see here a lady that works in this house. And normally in these houses, there's like 10 ladies like this that do everything, like if they were kings, for example. So you can see how she's staring at another direction, because she doesn't stand this girl normally. Yeah, it's so much different. And I used to grow up in between these kind of environments too. My grandfather was a top political founders of this political party. So I know all these houses too, and I know these people. And definitely it's normally people that is really superficial, and they don't care about people, and these people super cold. It's like Donald Trump. Yeah, like that bad. Yeah, rich Mexicans are that bad. So not all of them, but in a lot of way, a lot of them. It's they don't really have sensibility, and you can see breaches like these ones. Like if this was like something really normal, and it is really not.
那我们第一个要看的是 Daniela Rosell 这位摄影师，然后他的祖父其实是PRI， 就是墨西哥一个蛮重要的政党，然后本来是左翼，就是革命派的，但是他已经在墨西哥执政了70年，所以慢慢就是大家都变得很腐败。 然后所以他的祖父就是这个政党的高官，然后他是负责某一个地区叫做 Tabasco， 就是那个墨西哥甜辣酱的那个墨西哥辣酱的那个 Tabasco， 然后那像这些政府高官的小孩，其实他们住在就是这种超级豪华，然后充满很多奢华的，比如说水晶灯啊，或是那种就是很高级的地毯、很高级的摆饰的房子。那 Daniela 他有一天他就突然就是跟他周围的朋友，就是 cousins 他的亲戚说，我要拍你们这些女孩子平常的生活。然后这些女孩子都非常就觉得很高兴，就是他要拍他们，然后他们非常的天真，根本没有想到他其实这个他是有一些政治意图的。那像这张照片，你可以看到这是他的一个好朋友，然后就是非常慵懒的在那个高级沙发上坐着。那你可以看到后面有一个应该是他们家的女佣。然后他说，在这样的房子里面，通常会有10个这样的女佣在做事。然后你可以看到那个女佣就是根本是头转一边，就是不是看着他主人，因为其实这些佣人他们可能也很受不了这些就有钱人的行为。那然后说，其实他自己也是在类似这样的环境长大，就是他的祖父也是那个政党高官，所以他才会认识Daniela。那所以他对这些场景都非常的熟悉，然后甚至也认识这些照片里面的
人。下一张。
We can pass to the next image. Yeah, this one. Yeah, this is another photo from the same series. As you can see, there's in these photos are a portrait too about how women in these conditions can be or can try to be like a little girl forever. And so, for example, normally her grandfather or her fathers are like these political powermans in Mexico that they want to see her daughters like little girls, like really naive and innocent. And so this photo, for me, it goes beyond the socio-political situation. It's really about how this transcends and goes into the boundaries of this psychological condition. There's a lot of dolls, and another thing is that is quite interesting is that a lot of these girls are normally blonde, and some of them are, and some of them are artificial blondes, because in Mexico it's divided on two, and in all Latin America. It's the people that come from the Spanish, from the Europeans, and there's like an apartheid that there's the other people, that is the people from that come from the Mayan culture and the Aztec culture, and you can see how the political or the powerful condition is still being like in the colony in all Latin America. The factors, some countries in Latin America have avoided that, like Cuba, for example, that you can see more mixing and you can see more, we are equal from each other, but as most capitalist the country is, there's less mixture and there's more apartheid or intercultural divisions. So, and the interesting thing is that in fact, the rich people in Latin America and in Mexico, if they want to be and look like Europeans, because they feel identified with France or with Spain. So sometimes it's because their grandparents come from there, and some parts it's because they live in this imaginary condition. And we are going to see this kind of topic, of psychological topic, in these photographs, really mark.
那这一张也是同一个系列，就是 Rich and Famous 的。然后他说，在这样子家庭长大的女孩子，其实她们会有一种就是永远都像一个小女孩一样，所以在这张照片她摆了很多娃娃，而且就是他们的可能长辈也会希望他们就是永远保持这个小女孩非常天真纯真的状态。然后这其实已经不只是射精上面的问题，这就是也影响了他们某一些心理的状态。然后另外一个蛮有趣的是，他说其实在墨西哥的整个社会结构上面，还是有一个还是很像殖民地，就是掌权的可能都是那种欧洲移民，所以你会看到这一系列很多女孩子都是金发或者是染成金发，因为就是在欧洲移民还是在他们的上比较高的社经地位。然后另外一部分墨西哥人，他们就是从那种玛雅古文明出来的，然后可能就比较难有比较好的社经地位。
Other thing that I will say about this photo specifically, it's how Daniela marked everything with shadows and light. So if we see how she cares about the composition, it's brilliant because it's a mixture of how she managed to give a little light, and in the background there's like marked shadows that it gives you a psychological sense that something is wrong in this picture. And the other thing that is really interesting is to see how she plays a little girl, but in fact she is in a really like lost position. It's so it's a really interesting photograph because it plays two sides or two conditions. It's light and shadow. She's a girl, but she's a fatal female, for example. So it's a mixture of semiotics. It's a mixture of visual situations.
那这张照片你可以注意到，就是前面的人物他其实是有被打光的，可是你会看到后面有很多的阴影，就会让你觉得说后面好像有什么东西不对劲。然后另外一个就是他虽然扮演一个小女孩的角色，可是她的姿势跟她的穿着又让你觉得她是所谓的方法药，就是那种有致命吸引力的女人。
This is another photo, and I think that it's super interesting because it's another of the girls that she, for example, is the granddaughter of another president from Mexico, and she had like this open view, and I'm pretty sure that like this was taken not in Mexico. This is like Chicago or New York. And it's interesting because it makes sense with another thing. Normally, Mexican rich people, they put their money in bank accounts outside of Mexico. And they invest their money in Chicago, or they invest their money in New York. And they live in these like brilliant apartments in these places. And so you can see how Daniela is playing, because Daniela, in fact, she studied in the ICP, the International Photography Center. And I'm pretty sure you see the photo, it's a great photo, the composition, but it's great in their semiotics too. How this girl, that she comes from this powerful family in Mexico, it's living another reality outside of Mexico.
然后这张照片其实不是在墨西哥拍的，它可能是在芝加哥或者是纽约拍的，因为很多墨西哥有钱人他们都会把他的账户放到海外，然后在芝加哥或是纽约做一些投资，那就是同时他们在这些地方也会买那种很豪华的公寓，然后。那其实 Daniela 她是在纽约的一个摄影学院叫 ICP， 读书的，然后这也是他另一个朋友，然后他这个朋友的祖父也是墨西哥的，就是党政要人。
This is one of my favorites because, in fact, I have been in this house, and she is the wife of a friend, and definitely it's like really a place where you can see this. This is outstanding. How the excesses are really there. It's when you go into these houses, there's some things that you are gonna see, and one of these things it's like real lions that somebody shot in a safari in Africa, and in the other way, the portraits of the family here, and in the others, this is another element. This is the Mexican cock. The Mexican cock is the fighting cock. So normally this is a really symbol of the Mexican people. And it's really interesting because in all these excesses, what they actually do is that they do these cocks, like this is a golden cock made from gold. And so if you join all this composition, it's like, this is like, it goes beyond Beverly Hills 990 to like this show in the States from the 90s. So what I find really interesting is all this mixture is not the photo that it just impact about hair, about all the furniture. It's about all the symbols, how she's staring and she's like putting her feet in the lion as a symbol of prepotency, like this is my power. And in the other way, there's these portraits over here that is like the family legacy. And in the other way, this is the cock that it's like the cock of the Mexican people in gold in this house that is full of excesses. So yeah, this is one of my favorites. The composition is really good. We have a lot of elements that in together they make sense with Daniela's statement.
然后他说这一张照片其实是他最喜欢照片之一。他自己也曾经去这个家里面，就是照片中这个女人是一个朋友的太太。然后你可以看到这个家里面充满了很多不必要的奢华的东西。比如说那个老虎是就是可能有人去非洲杀了它以后把它做成标本，然后前面有一个就是墨西哥斗鸡的，而且它是用金子做的。那其实墨西哥斗鸡就是象征了墨西哥人民，可是它又把它做成是金的，就是你可以看到它是就是多么奢华不必要。然后墙上有一堆是可能他们这个家的人的肖像。然后，那个女人她的那个姿势是她脚踩在那个狮子上，就是表现她的某一种权力的象征。
This is a similar image that is taken by Daniela, and for me it's the same. Animals for me have this brilliant characteristic that have to be respected, and this is a jaguar, for example. And Mexico's people in the jungle, jaguars are gods, and they are really sacred gods. In the Mayan culture, the jaguar is one of the most powerful deity or the most powerful god, and their respect is absolute. They never shot or killed jaguars. In fact, because it's like killing their god. For me, this picture is really good because actually it's how the political system and this political system have killed the people's god and put it in their house. So it's as superficial. They want to look something that actually is really powerful and really meaningful in something that it's shy and superficial.
那就是这个画面里面的那个捷报，其实对一般的墨西哥来说是有神圣的意义，就是他们觉得捷报是他们所有的神里面最神圣的。然后他觉得这张照片很讽刺的地方是，这些有钱人他们杀了就是对人民来说最神圣的神，然后把他们做成标本放在自己家里。
This is another photo that I find it like really interesting. In fact, because it makes sense what actually was saying, that how people in Latin America normally live in this, people that lives in a higher socio-economical position, it's totally apart from the other people that lives in poverty. But it's not only about economical conditions, it's about race conditions or ethnicity conditions. But normally people that comes from the revolutionary process, or their grandfathers were generals, or they were these leaders, they tried to say to people, we are really proud of being Mexican, and we are really proud of the Mayan and Aztec culture. But and they put it like normally in like here in this, you can see it in the walls, in paintings, because Mexican folklore is about that. Like there's this kind of structure of selling Mexico for tourists that is like, hey, you have to come and you're gonna see like a really happy, everybody's happy, and like the people, the Mayan and the Aztec people, they go together really well, and we are so proud that we have them in our houses. But in the real world, it doesn't really work like that. In fact, there's like a bridge, like this girl over here and these paintings. There's a big space between them. And it's not only a big space about how she dresses, how she looks. It's something like, I show what I'm proud of, but in the real way, they don't really care. So for me, this is absolutely a kind of visual reflect or semiotics on a bridge of conditions or a bridge of two different worlds.
然后，就是其实这些墨西哥有钱人，他们常常都会说啊，我们非常以生活墨西哥人为荣，然后我们非常喜欢玛雅的文化，然后所以他们的家里面可能就会有这些就是墨西哥人的肖像。可是你可以看得出来，就是照片中这个女孩跟这些肖像中间其实是有距离的，而且就是她其实也不是真的那么在意这些人。然后这其实也象征了，就是在真实的世界里面，这两个社会阶级是没有交集的，而且中间还有一个很大的落差。
We can put, yeah. For me, this picture is like absolutely great because it captured the essence of what we are saying. She is one of the daughter. She's Daniela's cousin, and she is the granddaughter of this big political leader as Daniela, and her father is a politician too in Mexico, from Tabasco. And this is something really, really regular to go to the leader's office and see Zapata. Zapata is a revolutionary from Mexico. As Mexico, like Russia and China, have a parallel in the revolution context. It was but everybody have their unique situations. In Mexican situation is that Zapata, that is here, he was a guy that actually fight for their people, and he was somebody from, he was he worked in the camp. So what happened is that when revolution win the war, he got killed by other revolutionaries. So what it was really interesting is that actually politicians from this political party took Zapata as a symbol. So, but they don't really represent what Zapata really means. So what they do was changing the meaning of a true revolutionary to somebody that they are not. And in this photo, all these political charges is here. And it's really interesting to see how this is Danielle, this is her name, I think is Paulina, and this is her father. He's with Zapata in the back. This is Zapata in the back. This is the revolutionary Zapata here. So it's everywhere, but in this office, that is like a really elegant office that, of course, it have air conditioner, it have GBL sound, and it's really interesting because she is like saying, I don't give a shit. This is nonsense. It's ironical. It's like, so this is a really powerful photo because it have all these symbols and it have the attitude of her saying the truth. We don't care. So yeah, this photo it's really brilliant how she managed to put all these symbols and to put it in one image that tells all this story.
那照片中的这位女人是 Daniela 的，应该是堂姐妹吧。然后你可以看到这张照片很有趣的是，最后面那个很大的画像是墨西哥一个重要的革命家，叫做 Zapata。然后他是真正就是为人民奋斗的一个革命家。可是当他们赢得战争之后呢，他马上就被其他人暗杀了。然后，可是很有趣的是，PRI 这些人，他们可能会一直用 Zapata 来显示他们还是有那种革命的精神，但是其实他们都已经完全腐化了。然后最前面那张照片是这个女孩子她的爸爸，然后你可以看到她那张照片的后面放的也是 Zapata， 然后那个雕像也是 Zapata。就是在这个 office 里面充满了 Zapata 的象征，可是他们做的事却是跟他背道而驰的。然后这个女孩子她的整个姿势还有她的表情，都像在告诉你说，我根本就不在乎这一切，就是我不在乎 Zapata， 我根本就不在乎。然后就是表现了那种，就是有钱人他们其实对这些事都已经不在乎了。
It's interesting because, in fact, I'm, as a photographer, I'm too an analyst, political analyst. So that's why everything on my photography is charged on politics and in socio-economical factors. And when I used to work in the Mexican Senate, it was really common that the senators or the congressmen were like dressed with Ferragamo ties and Gucci. But they have a Zapata in their office, big stuff like this. And they were like, this goes beyond of cynical. It's like, hey man, it doesn't really make sense what you're doing. Yeah, it's like, so this is really what happens in this dystopian figures in political systems. And it shows how the rich class of Mexico play with that figures and symbols.
他说，就是他以前也有在墨西哥这样投资工作室，然后他就说，就是你可以看到那些参议员，他们可能身上打的是Ferragamo领带，然后戴着 Gucci 表，就是身上全身上下都是名牌。可是他们喜欢在办公室里面放很大很多的Sabada的一些照片或是雕像，然后就是你可以感觉到那个讽刺。
Well, we're going to talk about another photographer. Her name is Yvonne Venegas. And Yvonne, it's interesting because her sister is one of the most famous pop singers in the Spanish language. Her name is Susana, Julieta Venegas. Yeah, and in Mexico, Julieta Venegas. In Spain, it's like, Julieta, yeah. And she's really cool. I like her music. She's a really political activist in a really strong way. And her sister, it's Yvonne. It's her twin sister, in fact. Everybody confused her with her sister, and she's a brilliant photographer. And it's interesting because she's from Tijuana, so she's from the north part of Mexico. And she wrote a letter to her. Her name is Maria Elvia de Hank. She's the wife of one of the most known politicians in the north part of Mexico, in Tijuana area. He was the mayor of Tijuana, and he was not only the mayor of Tijuana. He's owner of all these casinos in Tijuana. So he's really rich, and he's in politics, and he's known that he's always in like really dark places that are between politics and business. In fact, it's interesting because he has a zoo for himself, where he has white tigers, Indian tigers, giraffes, and it's like he lives in Wonderland, like in this place. So Yvonne said it's really interesting to document the life of these persons, because Yvonne, she grew up in a family of medium socioeconomical standard. They have money, but they were not rich, so they have to work a lot to get everything that they have. And these people live like princes or like queens. So she wrote a letter to her and said to her, hey, can I go to your house and do a little bit of documentation of how you live? And I'm really interested to check out how your life looks like, because it's kind of different from where I live. I have to be worried about doing photographs all the way, and to pay my rent, and you don't have to. So she was like, yeah, you should come. And they're really good friends right now. And actually, this work for me, it's really interesting because it's a work that Yvonne have done for about 10 years of documenting the life of these people. And it's not that graphical as Daniela's work. It's not that hard, but it have a lot of metaphors, and it have a lot of information in the infralines. So actually, what we're gonna see in this series is what we call in Mexico bautizo. So she is the grandmother, and so the grandmother, it's like she plays a really important part in Mexico with the godfather. So they dress this kid like a big cake, and in fact, it's like for them it's like super beautiful, and they love it, and they do all this paraphernalia, and everybody gets really dressed, and everybody's super beautiful. The men are super handsome, and the girls are super beautiful, and it's like the Godfather, yeah. But we are gonna see the photos. We are gonna see how this transcend in other cylinder, like in other kind of lines.
那接下来我们要看到的摄影师是一方那个，那他是生长在一个比较算中产阶级的家庭，就是他们家有一些钱，可是他还是必须要很努力的工作。然后，穿粉红色衣服这个女人，她是底矿，就是墨西哥北部底矿这个地方的一个将军的夫人。然后他们就是因为这个将军就是他也有赌场，所以他们就是过着非常奢华的生活。所以伊方有一天就写信给这个将军夫人，就说，我想要记录你们家的生活，就是我觉得你们的生活跟我很不一样，我觉得很有趣，我想要记录。那他整个作品大概花了10年的时间记录这个家庭。
This is the daughters of part of the family that was documented in Yvonne. And again, it's like going to a Lewis Carroll tale. And everybody's blonde, everybody's like white, and it's like they live in this kind of like rich ghetto where everything is super perfect. Or supposed to be like that. And for me, this picture, it's really great because it shows all the beautiful dresses and all the beautiful likeness that are in these places that are completely apart from the daily basis of a Latin American reality.
那这个是这个家族里面的2个小孩。你可以看到他们的衣服都非常的漂亮，然后就是那个阳光的那个感觉，也让你觉得这好像是一个非常明亮、美丽的地方。然后，可是这跟现实的墨西哥社会其实是很脱节
的。This is super interesting because, in fact, the husband of Maria, that he was the subject of Yvonne, is this guy that was the mayor of Tijuana, and he have like a lot of animals, and one of the animals that he loved is having bears. So he's here like with his bear, like, hey Johnny, let's go. And then these people, it's crazy because if you see this stuff, you can say like, this looks like harmless. These people is super nice. They live in this super context. And the reality is that they are much more darker than what we can see here. But it's crazy how when normal people actually is thinking on buying a dog, he's buying a bear. So it's like, it's crazy. Like, yeah, I have a new bear. Do you want to meet him? Yeah, sure, yeah. So it's goes like that. That's how rich Mexicans live. It's crazy. Yeah, so we can, yeah, sorry.
那这个照片里面就是他刚刚提到那个将军，然后这个将军很奇妙，他有一个私人的动物园，里面可能就有白老虎啊、印度老虎啊，各种各式各样的动物。然后照片里面这是他的一只熊。那很好笑的是，就是一般人可能想说，哦，我要养猫或者是养狗，可是他想到的是，哎，我要养一只熊。
Okay. We come to the next. Okay. This is like this is a picture from the 90s, beginning the 2000s. So you can see how people actually is living in in these places are with Mercedes and Ferraris, and they're well all up with Gucci all the time, and it's like a world completely apart. So this photo shows the. It's interesting because at the same time, where they do normally some parties, it's in the zoo or near the zoo of this millionaire, and so they put like a big circus on it, and they put like tacos, and but they arrive in their Mercedes and all dress up, and yeah, it's this little rich ghetto that Yvonne, I think she documented really well.
那像这些有钱人，他们平常的社交生活其实是跟就是现实的墨西哥社会脱节的，就是他们可能就是会坐着像宾士啊或什么法拉利这种高级轿车，然后到另一个有钱人的家附近，然后他们可能就会在比如说空地上面摆一个很大的那种帐篷，然后就是弄得像马戏团一样。
This is like, for me this picture is brilliant, because this is like the cousins and all the kids that lives in the family, and it's like the Sopranos. Yeah, it's how they are dressed up like Tony Montana, and actually they have the attitude, and they know that at some point in their lives they're gonna have to be like that in a serious way. So all these people, all these kids are like my friends in Mexico, and they have an attitude, and normally they are gonna be politicians, or their people have a lot of, they expect a lot of things from them, and they have to be like tough men. They cannot be weak. And in these photographs you can see these guys that are maybe 15 years old, 16 years old, that they have all this attitude that what they have to be in the future. And it's interesting because all this soprano attitude or this Corleone attitude, it's that kind of attitude that the rich class of Mexicans and Latin Americans, and we share it with Spain and Italy too, have. And it's interesting how Yvonne took it without, they were not noting it, and she have it there.
那这是这个家族里面的那些小男生，他们大概就是青少年10几岁。然后他提到，就是这些人他们都会有一种那个 soprano 的 attitude。soprano 就是美国有一个影集，中文好像是翻译成黑道家族，然后他就是讲说那种黑手党家族的故事。然后你可以看到这些小孩子，他们都有一种就是刻意要显现自己好像是一个很角色的那种态度。然后因为这些人长大之后可能都会变成重要的政治人物，然后他们也被预期要有这样的态度。
This picture is formidable. I love it because it's in fact one of the members of this family, and it's a kid, and you can see, like, you see it, and it's like, again, like Donald Trump, right? It's like, it's this super rich kid that is sitting down there and is like, hey, can you give me a glass of milk? There's like 2 people that goes and here's your cake and take your glass of milk, and he wasn't expecting that Yvonne is going to take him a photo, but he doesn't care. He's like, he's really rich, he's really powerful, he's going to have a great dinner, he just got back, so they live in this super rich context where everything is safe, and where everything is about big spaces and excesses. And it's interesting because it's how they grow up since they're kids. they are not used to other kind of life. So that kind of life for them is the natural thing. So, yeah.
然后这张照片就是这个家族里面的一个小男孩，然后他就说，你看他，你就会想到好像那个美国的总统候选人 Donald Trump 一样，就是他就坐在那边，就是说啊，赶快给我牛奶啊，然后就会可能又会有些佣人跑过来，然后帮他给他牛奶，然后给他点心什么的，就是好像他从来都不需要去担心这些事情，而且就是他从小就是这样长大，所以他也不知道有其他的生活方式。
This is one of the parts of the zoo that this family have, their private zoo. And it's interesting because Yvonne took this photo as part of this series. And of course it's not a pretty photo. So actually you can see how there's this big park over here and it doesn't really make sense with all this beauty. And at some cases they have their animals in some other parts, and it gives a lot of the sensation that it's much more harder than you can see in the superficiality.
然后这个照片就是他们家的那个私人动物园。
This is another photographer that we're gonna see. Her name is Maria Jose Sesma. She is a young photographer. I think she's about 24 years old, and she is from the other part of the north of Mexico. Because what we're gonna see later, it's a map of Mexico. We're gonna see the regions, but Yvonne is from the left north, and Maria Jose is from the right north. She's from Coahuila. The state of Coahuila, it's in the other side of the north of Mexico. And she documents all this emptiness that they are in the wealthy houses of Coahuila. And the other thing of her main topics are how this the woman that lives in these scenarios or in this socio-economical condition, they play this kind of little girl playground, like they were naive, and in fact they are really not. They compete from each other. They're mean, yeah, but everything is in these kind of like brilliant scenarios from nice houses. That is like the conditioned playground.
那我们接下来看到是 Maria Jose Sesma 这一位摄影师，然后他是来自墨西哥东北部的。他的作品主要都是在拍这些很豪华的家里面的那种空虚感，然后还有就是这样背景的女人，她们可能会表现得很像小女孩，可是她们其实也不是那么天真，她们就是彼此之间是会竞争的，甚至会耍一些小手段。
This is like another thing that is really interesting is that normally in Mexico, the woman it's the one that rules the house. Like for a house that it has sense on you break that, it's normally really difficult that it's gonna work in these traditional families. So the woman is here. This is Maria Jose's mother, and this is their cousins, and this is her uncle, and everybody gathers around the woman figure, and it's like a really, we call it in Mexico not a matriarcado, like mother system, like motherhood system, and she's everywhere. Like there's here a portrait of her And if you go to the bathroom, there's gonna be there a portrait of her, and it's like I'm everywhere, like God. So they really try to, and in fact, in the daily life, it's like that. The house is like a sacred place where the mother rules everything, and I think this photo really makes sense with all this motherhood system.
在墨西哥家庭里面，其实妈妈是这个家庭的主要决策者。然后你会看到，就是在这张照片里面，妈妈站在这边，然后其他人就是围着她，然后墙壁上有一张她的画像。然后如果你进到洗手间里面，可能又有一张她的画像，就是好像妈妈在这个家庭里面是无所不在的。可是这一方面也是一种就是男主外女主内的社会结构。
This is what we're talking about. It's crazy, but Maria Jose, for example, she went out of her house when she was 19 years old. So she had a really different gaze and different way of living than her cousins and her family. She went to Mexico City to study, and she grew up as a person, and when she goes back to see her cousins, she see how they keep living, and some of them they keep living in this way. Like in her rooms, they still have dolls, for example, like all over the way, and it's like and they play like this kind of part, like if they were like little princes, and for Maria Jose, this is nonsense. They are 27 years old, 26, 28, and they still live in this kind of magical, naive kind of life that for Maria Jose doesn't make sense. So this picture, it talks about that condition.
马拉不是他其实在19岁就离开家里，然后去墨西哥读书。可是当他回到家乡，他看到他的那些同兄弟姐妹的生活，他都会觉得非常不可思议。比如说在照片里面，这个应该是他的堂妹，然后可能已经超过25岁了，可是他的房间里面充满了娃娃，然后他自己也打扮得像一个娃娃，就是好像永远都不会长大。
This is another photo that actually it's Maria Jose's family too, and it's full of symbols, and it's full of what is actually the day-on-day basis on this socio-economical status. Like if there's like a wedding or there's something like a family party or wherever, there's a lot of competition that who's gonna wear the best dress, who's gonna wear the best suit. Woman doesn't repeat the same dress in the weddings, and crazy things like that. And but it's like part of the basic rules of being part of that system. And in this photo, Maria Jose took like all the natural environment that it's about that, and it's about this competition that is in the inner lines of the daily life. And one interesting thing is that here it's La Virgen de Guadalupe, that it's a virgin that is in Catholicism in Mexico. It's really important, and she's like the most important virgin and the most important sacred religion symbol in Mexico. And it's in the house of the poor, and it's in the house of the rich. And so they have all these like, for me it's really kind of like French paraphernalia, but they are Mexican, so they have the Virgin here.
他说这张照片很有趣的是，他其实捕捉到了在这样的上流社会里面，女人中间是会彼此竞争的，就是如果有个 party， 大家会比较说谁穿的最漂亮，然后你不能跟别人撞衫，你也不能穿重复的衣服， 然后他这一系列照片都是在讲，就是这种女人间暗地的竞争。然后你可以看到照片最右边有一个小画像，这是墨西哥的一个他们宗教里面的一个圣母的象征。然后你可以在有钱人家看到，也可以在穷人家里面看到。所以他觉得这是一个蛮有趣的对比，就是一个圣母画像，然后在一个这么竞争的女人中间。
This is another room from Maria Jose's series. This is really interesting because normally it's like a traditional house of a wealthy family in Mexico, and it's full of photos, and it's like a big collage of all the family that actually doesn't really make sense, and but it's like the history in one wall, all right? And all these faces and all these characters and subjects makes sense on a family that for them it's that we don't just have a present, but we have a past, and it's full of symbols. Everything in these houses, it's about symbols and about a narrative that takes or tells the story of the family.
那这是就是在一般墨西哥有钱人家里会常看到的场景，就是可能有在书房里面有一整面墙都是他们的家族照片，然后就像是在记录他们的家族史一样。然后对他们来讲，这代表就是说，我们不是只有活在现在，我们还有我们过去就是深远的家族史。
This is why we're saying it's the same things about the figure in the house, and for example how everything in this motherhood system is ruled by the mother, and of course this is really nice, really nature. I feel identified because this woman looks like my mother, so it's and it makes sense because in the wealthy part of Mexican socioeconomics, almost all the houses have like details that have a collateral context like this one, and there's a lot of like porcelain dolls, and everything is way on the decoration of the queen or the ruler of that space that normally is not normally in Mexican traditional houses is the mother.
在这种有钱人的墨西哥家里面，妈妈就像一个就是皇后，然后一个统治者一样。然后他说这张照片的妈妈就是会让他想到自己的妈妈。然后你可以看到旁边就是有很多很漂亮的瓷偶，然后都是非常装饰性的，都没有可能不是那么实用。可是，在这样的家里就常常会看到这些东西。
This is Eugenia Martinez, and I really like Eugenia because she's a photographer, but actually the favorite thing that I like about her is that she rescues archives from old photos, and she writes on the photos, like ironical sentences that say something about their subjects. So what she actually do is like surround all the images, but all these words that, for example, in this, it says, hasta que la muerte nos separe. That it's until death separate us. That, in fact, in Catholicism, when you get married, the priest is what they say. And so it's really interesting because, of course, this gentleman and this lady, rest in peace, they are in another latitude. And she put in little words all these sentences, like hasta que la muerte nos separe, hasta que la muerte nos separe, like all of that. So she mixed the power of the word with images. And I think that's really powerful and interesting.
接下来我们看到的是 Virginia Martinez 这一位摄影师，然后他这一系列作品很有趣的是，他把一些老照片找出来，然后会在上面写一些可能是讽刺性的文字，然后整个包围了整张照片。比如说在这张照片，他写的是如果翻成英文就是 Until Death Do Us Part， 就是在一般如果基督教的婚礼上，他们都会有这个誓言，就是说直到死亡将我们分离。
I want to take a photo because she's a really good friend of mine. And she's gonna be really happy that I'm talking about her photos.
那这位摄影师是他的好朋友，所以他现在想照照片。
Sorry, thank you. Yeah, so for example, what she actually do is trying to, she asks a lot of people, she goes to little stores and she rescues a lot of photos from old archives. She goes to libraries. In fact, she lives in a zone in Mexico City that is like a really traditional, beautiful zone in the center. And the first thing that she told me that she did when she arrived to her apartment was going with her neighbor and tell her, hey, she was an old lady, the neighbor, and she was like, do you have photos? Do you have, by the way, some photos, some relative that you want to share with me? And people normally are like, you take a scanner, but there's some other people that says, you know something, I have some photographs and I'm gonna die and nobody's gonna do anything about it. So sometimes she works in a lot of kind of ways, but normally these photos are original photos. So it's really interesting because people actually consent that she works on the photo with this kind of words. And normally it's something about this situation. For example, this is 4 gentlemen. These are all these gentlemen, and in these gentlemen there's a lot of words of something that is called that is about manhood in Mexico, and it's surrounded by all these words that makes a game between this old photo and the words.
Virginia 他的就是他通常都会去到处找可能邻居或是朋友，然后去敲他们问说，哎，你有没有什么老照片可以让我使用？然后这些人他们可能就想说啊，反正我都已经要就快要死掉了，然后我有这堆老照片，我也不知道拿它干嘛，所以就把照片给他，然后他就这些照片大部分都是就是原始的照片，所以他就直接在照片上面写这些字，然后做创作。那像这一张照片，就是里面可以看隐隐约约看到，可能就是有一群的男人，然后所以它上面写的字就是关于说，在墨西哥男人应该是什么样子。
This is another photo by Eugenia, and it's really interesting because in this, it's like a play of the 2 images, and it's surrounded. It's placed with different subjects on it, and normally these photographs were taken in a political context. For example, these are the Red Cross ladies, and the people demands that normally were the leaders, they don't have a leadership in the photograph. And all the words are surrounding the condition of the ladies that are in the photos.
那他的照片通常也会有一些政治的意味，像这张照片，其实是一些就是红十字会的女士们，然后可是其实后面那边可能是在这个团体里面比较重要的人物，可 可是他却把他们用字写上去，就是模糊掉。
These photos are like, I love this series because, in fact, it's about how she works with political scenarios too. And in this work, it's a series called Totem, and it's about photographs from the political system in the 70s in Mexico. So in this photo, it's really interesting how this is the people from the streets, the people from the crowds, and they are there normally because they are part of a system. They don't really believe in the system, but they are there to go to a political meeting, and you can see how the faces are like, what? Like, what are they saying? Like, it's like there's a lot of confusing situation there. And in the bottom, it's the presidential candidate from that moment. Because one thing that is really interesting with the political system in Mexico, it was ruled by one political party, but actually they have elections. It wasn't a dictatorship at all. They play this election game where other political parties present themselves, but the other political party didn't have any chance because this political party was owner of everything, was owner of the petroleum, was owner of everything. Like they ruled Mexico. So, but they wanted to look for outside, like democratical. So they say every 6 years we're playing this game as a democratical game. The interesting part of this is that they have some rotation because they were different presidents, and these presidents were from different political groups. So actually going to the condition of rich Mexico, poor Mexico, this is perfect how Eugenia plays with two images from the rich Mexico and the poor Mexico.
那这张照片就有很明显的政治意图，你可以看到前面的人是就是参加游行的人，可是他们可能是比较劳工阶层的，然后你可以看到他那个表情，就是好像就是听不清楚到底发生什么事情了，就是其实是一个有点混乱的状态。然后他们拿的那个旗子是一个就是总统候选人。然后，那墨西哥很有趣的是，其实他们还是一党专政，因为他们的 PRI 可能是拥有石油，所以他们掌握了所有的钱跟权力。可是，在他们为了要好像表现给世界看说，我们还是一个民主国家，所以他们每6年还是有个总统选举，但是就是各党还是都会派出自己的代表，可是其他党其实基本上是没有什么机会的。然后他用同一张照片，可是他模糊了不同的人，这其实就是他觉得这张照片就可以表现出就是有钱的墨西哥跟穷的墨西哥这两个阶级的对比。
This is another photo from the same series that actually it tells this game of politics and the wealthier part of Mexico. How, in fact, the photo was, of course, this photo was together, and what Eugenia did was like put it one way and another, because that's reality. This is where people playing something like, oh yeah, we're friends, I give you the hand, we're going together. But the truth is what Eugenia made with this. It goes upwards. So everything in the political and in the high standards of economics, I think not only in Mexico, but in the world, are like Game of Thrones, are like this. It makes sense on treasons and on different kind of what actually you are seeing normally doesn't belong for a reality.
那这张照片其实你可以看得出来，他们本来是就是两个人在握手，或是可能有碰触，然后他把这个照片中间剪开之后，把它整个方向放反，然后就其实表现的在这种政治或者是比较高社经地位社会，他们好像表现的我跟你很好，我是朋友，我跟你握手，但事实上大家心里都各怀鬼胎，就像那个。就是 HBO 有个影集叫《冰与火之歌》，就是大家为了权力的竞争，就是表面上跟私底下都是相反的。
This is another photographer. Her name is Maya Godet. For me, Maya is one of the most complete photographers that we have right now in Mexico. She's great photographer, really brave one, and she has documenting a really hard condition in Mexico that it's about the poverty on the prostitution areas in the border of Mexico and United States. And for example, I did this on purpose because we begin with the rich Mexico, and we are going to talk right now about Maya, that it's about the poor Mexico. So in this photo we can see how this is a Mexican immigrant that works in the United States, and actually he doesn't have a house. So when he earns some money with his guitar and normally they work in the camp, they go to these places where they can have a lot of beers. And they work a lot of ladies that they work in this kind of prostitution systems, and so this is all this kind of like landscape that is really common to see in these little cantinas. That is like this kind of like places with music and exactly this kind of like chairs and these kind of tables. So this scenario is a really common thing to see in the poor Mexico, and yes, it's because of the immigration situation and where was kept this photo. I think it's a really powerful image.
那我们刚刚看到的都是属于比较上层的墨西哥社会。然后我们现在要看的是玛雅格雷，他记录的都是在就是美墨边境，然后而且生活非常辛苦的墨西哥人。那像这个是一个在美国工作的一个墨西哥移民，然后他可能根本就没有家，然后卖掉他的吉他，拿到一点点钱，然后就来这个小酒馆就是喝酒，然后可能这边可能也会有一些妓女。然后你可以看到这里面的桌椅看起来都是那种很廉价的塑胶的，然后他觉得这张照片很能表达那种就是穷的墨西哥人的生活。
This is another photograph from that series that I think is really powerful. This is how actually these photos were really nearby the same place where Yvonne took the photos. So, do you see that? This is like, it's another planet. It's another world. It's not really connected at all. It's like, this is the other Tijuana. This is the other Mexico. So, in this place, this is the place where we saw a kind of, in the interior, but in the outside. And the name of the place, it's called La Chamba. La Chamba, it's like a slang way of saying the work, but in a metaphorical way, it can be used to significance the work of the women that work in this kind of bars, of the prostitution that works in these areas.
那这张照片其实是在就是迪弗纳这个区域，就是我们刚刚有看到以放它有一系列是拍那个迪弗纳的一个将军家，然后你可以看到就是这张照片跟那一系列照片是一个很大的对比，可是其实都是在同一个区域。然后这一间餐厅的名字叫 La Chamba， 然后其实它指的就是就是工作，然后特别是指这种可能妓女的工作。
This is for the kid of one of the prostitutes that lives in these areas, and they live in really hard conditions. They live in, normally they don't have bed. They sleep in the floor. They normally, this for example, normally they have dogs, normally they have pigs in this area, and it's like part of the playground, and it's a really hard conditions where people from all ages live in these kind of areas. So this is really poverty, because it's not just about an economical situation. They do a really hard work for the ladies, and to be bad paid and bad treated, and even their kids lives in really hard conditions like this one.
那这张照片其实是就是一个妓女的小孩，然后你可以看到他们住在他们可能就直接睡在地板上，也没有床，没有什么其他棉被，然后可能跟一些小动物，就是狗或者猪这样睡在一起，然后就是这些女人，她们其实非常辛苦的工作，可是她们就是没有得到应有的报酬，然后可能也会被欺负。
This, for example, it's another photo that it tells Maya has photographed the prostitution aspect in a lot of areas in Mexico, not just one. And there is an area that is called La Merced in Mexico City that is like, you can see a lot of women that they are selling themselves in this area. And for me, this photograph have a lot of a big charge of elements, because in fact, if you see the knee of her, it has a scratch. So you see this photo and you see, well, it's a beautiful composition, but in the same way, you can see how harsh it's the condition where she has done this photography.
那巴亚格达其实它就是记录了很多墨西哥不同地区的妓女的生活，然后这张照片是在墨西哥市的一个区域，然后你可以看到这些女人，她们可能就是在街上像走街流氓一样，然后你可以看到最前面的这条腿，就是上面可能有很多的伤痕或是淤青，就是你可以感觉到其实她们的生活是非常辛苦。
This is another photo, and it shows how they normally the kind of rooms where they go when when the girls that works in prostitution work in, and normally like really dark places, and you can see how they have like a really she's super pretty, but at the same time she have a really hard gaze of what things that she have lived in, and it's this kind of portraits that have a really big charge on what she's living in.
那这张照片就是他拍摄的，就是他们工作的地方。然后你可以看到这是一个非常年轻美丽的人，然后可是他可能在一个就是很阴暗的地方工作。然后你可以看到，就是他的眼神其实也是非常的，就是感觉他活得很辛苦，然后很辛苦。
This is another photographer. Her name is Dulce Pinzon, and for me this is really interesting because she do portraits of the Mexican immigration in the United States as if they were heroes. So she plays with the figure, and I think it's really brilliant because actually there's a big migration in the United States from Mexico, and there's a lot of kind of migration. There's a lot of people that they have a degree that goes to the United States to work, or there's a lot of people from the socio-economical medium standards that goes to study. But normally, a lot of people that goes to Mexico is because they live in a really hard condition in Mexico and they look for better opportunities. And this is perfect, this kind of photographs and this kind of work, because you can see how, I'm gonna say again, these really bad people, assholes like Donald Trump says bad things about Mexicans, and actually Mexicans is doing the work that they don't want to do. And Mexicans are the people that empower their country. So for me, the work of Dulce used to work in New York, and she was like, and she had 2 little kids, so she was watching one day like cartoons, and she was like, she was seeing how all the Mexicans that were living in New York and working hard, how these people are superheroes, how these people were like doing an extra effort to do something for them and for their families. For her, well, like naturally to say to a friend, hey, you clean windows? Yeah. All right, let's, do you agree that I can take you a photo and I'm gonna give you some Spider-Man costume? Because for me and my kids, you're Spider-Man. Because you're a superhero. And where are you from? I'm from Chihuahua. All right. So you're gonna be the Spider-Man of Chihuahua. and that is brilliant because he's cleaning the windows of the building. So it's a descontextualization of superheroes.
我们现在看到，对不起，你这样，it's hard to pronounce. 然后他这一系列照片是在描绘美国的墨西哥移民，然后他要他们就是穿上这些超级英雄的装饰，因为就是Donald Trump之前就是说，觉得美国有太多墨西哥移民，想要把这些墨西哥人赶回家。可是事实上，这些墨西哥移民才是真正在做苦工的，他们做一些就是可能一般美国人不想做的工作，然后他们也非常努力的工作，然后养活他们自己的家人。所以对Doge来说，他其实觉得这些人对他还有他的小孩都像是超级英雄一样，所以他就拍摄了，比如说这个他是一个在清窗户的工人，然后他就请他穿上蜘蛛人的装束，然后这样子拍照。
This is another photo from Dulce that I think is brilliant because it's normally actually a lot of Mexicans work in the United States as babysitters, for example. So she's a babysitter of these blonde kids. She's Catwoman because it's these little brats there, like, hey, noisy brats, and their parents maybe the mother it's taking her flamenco classes. And the father is a Wall Street guy that they have these great views of but yeah, who saved the house? Catwoman, yeah, the nanny, and the Mexican nanny, and the Mexican nanny is the superhero of the house. So for me, I think this is beautiful because it's a tribute of these people that works there and really works really hard and make sense of all this house to work. So it's an outstanding work.
然后其实很多的墨西哥人到美国，他们可能是就是去做保姆，然后在这张照片里面，他就是把这个保姆装扮成那个 猫女一样，就是爸爸有可能是华尔街的人，然后妈妈可能就是去上他的什么跳舞课，然后是这个保姆在拯救这个家，就是不要被这些小鬼摧毁。
Yeah, and we're gonna pass now to my work. My work is about the conditions that for me are the root of poverty in the southeast of Mexico, in the Gulf of Mexico. And the Gulf of Mexico, it's a zone where there's a lot of petroleum. So what is actually happening right now is that a lot of big companies, oil companies, are establishing their posts there to drill and take out petroleum. And it's interesting because in the political statements, it's like we have to open, the political statement was like we have to open the petroleum to the invest of foreign companies. That way we can have progress and we can have money and we can have a lot of things. But actually what is really happening is that these companies are not creating progress and they are not creating wealthy. They are creating pollution in these areas, and they are people actually that lives there want them out because what they're doing is drilling. They don't really consume in the areas because in their posts where they work is where they eat, where they buy everything. So what actually they are doing is polluting all the areas, all the forests, all the seas. And what is happening with these kind of towns or these kind of places is that actually people is really disappointed because they were promised some other kind of progress and they're having all the pollution. So this is a typical dress of Halliburton, the oil company from the United States. And normally what they do is that when they stop using these dresses, they put it away. So it was really interesting because I was driving in that area and I saw a lot of costumes like this, like dressed like a doll. And I asked somebody from the town what we're gonna do with that doll. And they said me, we're gonna burn it. I was like, really? But and if you see it, it's kind of orange, it's nice, and they're like, well, they have a ritual where they burn an old man in New Year's Eve to burn the old year to have another year. But for me, these have a lot of metaphors because it's not only burning the man, the old man of the old year, it's burning the uniform that is contaminating and polluting all the area that is their houses and their home.
然后我们现在要看到老陆他自己的作品，他就是在墨西哥湾那边其实有很多的石油，然后那墨西哥政府就会说，我们要开放让外国的石油公司进来，这样墨西哥就会进步，就会有钱。但事实上，这些就是国外的石油公司，他们进来墨西哥其实并没有消费，所以它并没有帮助经济成长，可是反而造成了很多的污染。然后，那我们可以看到这个衣服其实就是他们那种石油工人穿的衣服。然后他就开车在路上看到有很多这样的衣服，他就问那边人说：“那你们之后要怎么办？”然后在墨西哥有个传统是，他们会在新年的时候把一些旧的东西烧掉。然后对他来讲，他觉得这个有很多的象征意义，就是它不仅仅是烧掉一些旧，就是当他们烧掉这件衣服的时候，不仅仅是烧掉旧的衣服，同时也烧掉这些制造污染的石油公司。
This is normally in this part of the Gulf of Mexico, it's really interesting because there's like beautiful beaches, but at the same time, there's other parts where there's like a really industrial parts where you can see these kind of infrastructure in the roads and in the ways. And for me, they have a lot of metaphors because it's like industrial ruins that after they use it, they put it there. Like they don't even use it again for something, or they do a recyclation process, or like they just put it there, and it's part of the landscape now. So it's kind of like the post-industrial capitalism landscape that is strong because it's tells this story. And this is a gas bombs, because in these areas they took a lot of, they work with a lot of petroleum and gas, so it makes perfect sense with all this area. This photo was taken in the Caribbean, so it's pretty far away from Tabasco, that it was where I took the other photo, but it's part of the same strait that is the Gulf of Mexico.
就是他们这些石油或是天然气开采完之后，就会制造很多的垃圾，而且他们就这样被丢弃在路边。然后他觉得，就是这有点像是那种后现代工业化的一些废弃物。
Oh yeah, this for example is a really dramatic photograph that it's about how. I took it in a town that actually, it used to be one of the richest towns, fisher towns in the Gulf of Mexico. The name is Lerma, and it's in the state of Campeche, in the Yucatan Peninsula. And it's interesting because what happened is that, first of all, they have the oil camps around. So for that, killed a lot of fish, and it's really bad for the sea and the ocean. And in the other part, the other thing that happened is that they didn't respect the times of fishing. So they fish so much and they get really rich in about 10 years, but after that 10 years, they didn't have anything in the sea. They start to be like the sea was empty. So what we're seeing right now is a really apocalyptic landscape of what it can happen with a town that now it's a ghost town. If they fish, they don't respect the ocean. First of all, because of the petroleum factor, and in parallel, because they took too much fish, they don't respect the ocean at all.
那这是就是墨西哥湾的一个小渔村，然后这里面它现在就是有点像是一个鬼城，以前就是也有一些石油的营区，然后但是因为石油造成的污染，再加上他们过度捕捉这些鱼，然后过了10年之后，可能这个区块都已经没有任何的鱼了，然后所以就这样变成一个荒废的小渔村。
And in this area, you can see a lot of boats abandoned there. That they used to be like the principal kind of commercial boats that go and to shrimp and to a lot of kind of shark and a lot of kind of fish. And right now they are like totally abandoned. Of course, for me, the abandoned and the contemporary ruins have certain kind of poetry and certain kind of romanticism. But the situation is that all that is based on a really harsh content. And the really harsh content is that all these photos are taken in this ghost town that it's abandoned by the condition of depredation, that it's have a parallel with ultra-capitalism, when people doesn't care about environment. And it's another kind of poverty.
然后这是一艘，就是在那个区域有很多这种废弃的渔船，然后对他来说，就是虽然这些废弃的东西或是一些废墟可能有某种诗意在里面，可是这同时也是一种 因为资本主义造成的废弃物表现。
This is another fall from there, and in my series there's a lot of visual charts, and I try to play with the elements that I have in the landscape. And for me, for example, some kind of things that they are there and nobody care, another part of the landscape is like kind of like sculptures from the disaster or sculptures from this situation. So I play a lot with these kind of elements and kind of capped all these landscape of the apocalypse, kind of like, or the post-industrial things that they are live in the ocean.
然后他也喜欢拍这种废弃物，然后他觉得这好像是一个雕塑，可是是比较像世界末日的那种雕塑。
And it's interesting because now what they are not more commercial fishing in this area because they empty all the area of fish, but there's still been some little boats that goes to fish a little bit. And there are other ones that they are, you can see how big boats, little boats are there abandoned. And it's interesting because these boats have a name that is called Jorge, that is George. And you can tell how the erosion and all the situation of this sea that it gets depreded gets in a really hard, but at the same time it's kind of romantic. But the hard conditions and the hard content are in these images.
然后在这边有一些就是废弃的小渔船，然后你可以看到这渔船上面还有名字。
This is part of the same series, and for example, this used to be a wall between a space and another, but all the sea is getting so much modified by all these industrial factors that right now the water, it gets in the walls, in some kind of, in the houses. There's some houses that are right now in the water. So this is what happened actually with climate change, when the climate factors are changed. Cities actually get in the water, or there's erosion, and the beaches get the characteristics and the natural characteristics change in a really dramatic and drastic way.
在画面中间，这本来是一条路，可是因为一些污染或是气候的变迁，让海水就淹过了这些路，然后甚至有一些房子都现在都是在这个水底下。
This is another fall, and this is like the normal landscape over there. So you can see how actually the fishermen that still live in there, they are just a few compared with 20 years ago. They live in really harsh conditions, and that creates, well, scenarios like this one that for me have a lot of metaphors, and it's a really metaphoric way of seeing things in this other side of the poor Mexico.
然后这边还是有一些少数的渔民住在这里，可是跟20年前比起来，可能就只剩下几个人。然后你可以看到他们的生活环境其实也不是很好，就是比较严苛。
Well, this is the map of Mexico. So what I wanted to put it in the end, it was to explain where are all the photos taken, because Mexico is so big and so varied, and it's like there's a lot of Mexicos in this Mexico. But with this image, we can have an idea of where everything was taken. For example, you can see that the photos of Ivonne Venegas are taken here in Tijuana. That is near San Diego. Practically San Diego and Tijuana are the same thing right now. And it is part of the north. That is called Baja California, because 200 years ago, all California was part of Mexico, and then it got divided, and one part is now part of the United States, and now Baja California, it's South California, that is this peninsula, remains being Mexico. And the photos of Maria Jose Sesma, the second photographer that we saw, she's from Coahuila, that is this part of Mexico. All these zones, or the north zone, is really industrial, and it's really complex because it's where we have right now a big problem with United States and the border and the cartels and the drug situation, but at the same time, it's the industrial part of Mexico. So it's a rich region too. Mexico is between the 10th and the 11th economy in the world. So all these big social economical differences are in a really big scale, because all in this part there's like a really big fabrics and there's a lot of commerce, especially to trade with the United States and Canada. And so yeah, Maria Jose is from here and Ivonne is from here. And all this, we can say that especially this part of Mexico, that is Monterrey and Coahuila, is a really industrial part, that the frontier is with Texas. And yeah, the other photographer that we saw, Daniela Rosell, her family is from Tabasco, and Tabasco is here. But actually she was brought here. And almost all the photos that we saw, just the Zapata one was made in Tabasco, but the other photos were made in Mexico City. And the other photos that we saw from Dulce Pinzon, of course, they were made in the United States. And the other photos that we saw about Maya Godet, they were made here in Ciudad Juárez, in the north part of Mexico. And my photos are made here, in the Gulf of Mexico, that goes from Yucatan, that this is the Yucatan Peninsula, it goes all around here. So all the photos I took it from here, basically, to here, in all this like key form.
这个是墨西哥的地图，然后我们看到伊方的那个他的照片都是在就是比较西北方，跟美国的圣地亚哥那边交界的地方。然后Maria Jose Sesma他的照片是比较在东北部，而且是那个区域其实是墨西哥主要的工业区领域，然后他们跟美国或是加拿大有很多的贸易往来，然后那也是墨西哥就是最多有钱人的地方。然后，瓦亚古代，它是那个瓦亚古代是在墨西哥北方的North
Mexico.
然后怎么样
？Eugenia, it's from Monterrey. That Monterrey is here, but she works between Monterrey and Mexico City.
那像软物他自己的照片，就是沿着墨西哥湾的地方。
Yeah, so this is it. Thank you very much. I hope you enjoy it. Please go to Mexico. It's a great country. We have a lot of contrast, but still, it's a really outstanding and vibrant place to go. Thank you for coming.
我们可以就是有 Q&A 嘛，大家就是 有什么问题，现在可以把握机会问老师一下。我觉得这个演讲实在是太精彩了 ，I'm very touched by your.
I'm happy that you like it.
Your presentation, your talk. 真的是很棒，而且我去过墨西哥啊，待了40多天。那个以一个在外地的人来去做一个文化的一个导览，跟实际上好物生活在那个地方所看到的墨西哥是真的两个世界。那我想我们要非常感谢好物今天能够有这个机会告诉我们他所生活的感受到的墨西哥的现况。那大家还没有问题，我先问一个好了，好不好？我先开好 opening. I ask one question.
Sure.
Break the silence.
Yes. Yeah, please. If you have any question, it will be very great to respond it.
I'm very interested in how you pay attention in symbols. I think it's quite different from Taiwanese photography because they don't really pay too much attention in symbols. And could you talk about this time, because you always explain in each photography taken by your friends, even by yourself, always around a lot full of symbols in Mexico. So, could you talk about why you are so interested in symbols and the life in Mexico, please?
I think that everything in life, but what actually I'm gonna say it's about Mexico because that's my natural ground, and everything is related to symbols. If you go in the Mexican pre-Hispanic culture, all the Mayans and the Aztecs get ruled by symbols, and in the Spanish culture, everything is ruled by symbols too. Like everything makes sense on the language based on symbols, and normally symbols are things that they're in the lines, and people have to think harder to get into it, to the metaphors that a symbol can give you. And I'm really interested in symbols because normally you capture that symbols when you go to the museums, you see a lot of exhibitions, you read a lot, and as in my case, the harder I study and the harder I know the work from other people, I can understand more things and I can understand more symbols. Like all these things that I explain about Daniela Rosel's work, it's because I study political science and I have read a lot of things about the Mexican composition of the social background. So I know that Daniela was doing it on purpose to try to create a clash of symbols in one image. And that's what actually I think that art, it's about that. It's to play with symbols and collide them to make sense in an image. So, and one of the things that I like, apart of making photographs or making images that are related to symbols, it's I like to interpret it. I write a lot about photographies, and also I'm a journalist. So, and I used to be a political advisor. So what actually was my formation was to discontextualize the things that are in the obscene to know what's in the underlines. And I think that things, only symbols can give you that information. And that's why I'm really interested in symbols, because everything is a symbol. Like in a room, in this room, it's full of symbols. And when you get dressed, it's full of symbols. My socks are made of dinosaur socks. So there are symbols on my socks. And so everything makes sense in the way that we are really surrounded by symbols that create the persons that we are and the landscape that we want to show. That's why I think that the most interesting thing about art is that they can give you the descontextualization and the information of symbols in a different manner than other kind of disciplines.
有没有听不懂的？
那我简单翻一下。刚刚我是问问题是就是关于就是象征物性的，然后就是他一直提到说，就是他觉得看这些照片可能会看到很多的象征物，然后他自己也对这些东西很有兴趣。那柔的回答是，就是他觉得你生活中的每一个东西都是 symbol， 就像你穿的什么衣服，其实也代表你是一个什么样的人。然后你的袜子上面有什么东西，那其实都是象征物。然后他自己本身其实是学政治的，然后他也曾经当过就是政治顾问，所以他会对symbol 这些东西很有兴趣，就是他会去看每个东西它隐藏的一些意涵。然后他觉得像 Daniela 的照片里面很有趣的是，他会把不同的 symbol 摆在同一张照片里面，而且他知道他是非常有意识的去做这件事。然后这也是他觉得 symbol 最有趣的地方是，你可以把所有的 symbol 摆在一起，让他们中间产生一种对话或者是一种冲击。
I'm curious about because I think the photos are very powerful, and I'm very wondering that if there are any like different classes, like the rich one or the poverty ones, will they get inspired and generate some real action to twist or to change the status quo after they have seen these photos?
Yeah, in some cases, yes. In the case of Daniela Rosell, was in part really fundamental to inspire the middle class of Mexico to vote against the ruling political party in the elections, and that was the first time that that political party lost in the history. And the thoughts were everywhere. It became a really political factor. So that's a really like a really example of what happened. Normally, what in fact is one of my projects is to break down one situation that I think is the same thing in a lot of parts in the world, that actually culture it's not for not everyone watches. Like everybody goes to see a Hollywood movie, or everybody goes to see unfortunately that kind of mass situations, and it's still being like little or not so little, but not big masses to watch this kind of information. So, but in some cases, like with Daniela Rosell, that was mass at that point. For example, with Maya Godet's photography, I hope that that kind of photos can be seen by everyone. How the women that works in these places in the north, they live in really hard conditions. And Maya is doing a really tough work with them, gathering with associations that they're helping them, and she's really up to. It's her cause of life. So yeah, she's doing changes. Maybe not in a mass situation, but in real changes in some kind of little or in some communities. And so on my work, well, I have a project on that it's about to tell everybody in this part to check out how pollution can change the landscape or the natural landscape from where they live, because sometimes they think they're going to be millionaires because petroleum is going to be open and the investments are going to be there. And that's the official statement. But the real statement is that the geographics get so changed and so polluted that, in fact, it doesn't get, people that live there doesn't have a better quality of life. In fact, in the opposite, they have a harsher times. And with Dulce Pinzón, everybody sees her work as an inspiration, and it's a really great tribute for immigrants and for people that live and work hard in the United States. I feel very identified with her because I am another Mexican that doesn't live in Mexico. I don't live in the same situation as my fellow Mexicans in the States in some kind of parts. But at the same time I feel identified because, and I feel touched because her photographs are really meaningful of what's happening right there and how they have to be, actually people have to start to see these people as they are. And I recommend you to check out Dulce Pinzón's website. It's really great. And she have a lot of superheroes. And it's really great. And she have like this superhero that's like Superman in a bike, like carrying all the bread. And but Spider-Woman is great. Because Spider-Woman, I put it here because it's an example of a woman that do everything, a Mexican woman that is working hard for American family to work as a family. And normally they get paid like $5 an hour or something like that. They don't, of course, they don't get great money. They do it because there are people that work hard, and there's good people that actually works with human conditions. So I think that yes, photographs have, and it would be really great can have a greater impact in the future. And we, all the photographers, were gathering to try to change things with our photographies. And so in some cases, yes, they change things. And in another ones, I think they're gonna change more things in the future. I hope so. It will be really good.
Because I think it's very meaningful if some people who are not in that situation, but if they can be aware of these, there are some meaningful environmental factors that make people there living in a very bad situation, and maybe we can like generate some changes or give them some help.
Yeah.
If we are able to do that. So I think this kind of media is very powerful for me, because I have never known that there are some extraordinary a very large gap. Yeah, between the two classes.
Yeah.
Thank you.
It's another. Oh, thank you. It's another. It's like two planets.
Yeah.
And of course, there's a medium class that lives in Mexico and in Latin America, but the rich class and the poor class, it's super different one from another one. And actually, there's people that look at like a natural situation, like if we were living in the colony. Like, I'm super rich, and I live like this with 2 or 3 mates, and that's the natural condition of life. And my mates have to get really bad paid because it's the natural thing, and so there's a lot of distortion that things, for me, it has to change at some point. And I think with new generations, that kind of things are changing. But as all changes, we need to do more efforts to show it, because normally people get sensitive when you show it and when they can see it, and they can see another perspective of even their own lives. Thank you very much.
刚刚他的问题是，就是这些照片，他们其实本身都有很强的力量。那 是不是能够去改变墨西哥社会的现况。然后然后有提到就是像整个老师的作品，就是他就是拍那些很夸张的那些有钱人的家里，然后那些作品当墨西哥人的中产阶级看到了，他们其实有受到影响，然后而且那是就是 PRI 这个政党第一次因为这样输掉选举，然后那其他有一些像他觉得马加古队的作品，他希望能够有更多人看到，然后更多人去关心这些性工作者的处境，然后就是其实改变都是有的，只是也许不是在一个很大的规模的改变，而是一点一点慢慢的改变。然后像他觉得都切比较能做吟唱的作品，就是让他觉得非常的感动，因为就是就是这些远离家乡，然后到可能美国或是其他国家工作的墨西哥人，其实他们真的是非常努力在工作，可是没有得到应有的尊重。可是在他的作品里面，他们把他们就是让他们扮演成超级英雄，就是在为这些人的苦功致敬。然后像他自己的作品，就是他希望能够让大家看到说，其实石油带来不是像那些政客说的，就是可以让墨西哥变有钱，或是让墨西哥的处境更好。其实反而造成的是更多污染的问题，然后环境的污染，还有改变了整个区域，就是可能让一些城市变成鬼城这样。
Thank you very much.
可不可以现场有其他的不是我们协会的，所以有谁愿意发言一下？来，男生。
Okay. Thank you today. Well, we got a great view and the big concept about Mexico situation. But I'm a little curious about how you think about Taiwan. For example, our society, our environment, have something you find is interesting or something related to Mexico from your photography lens.
Thank you very much. First of all, thank you everybody for coming. And I think that I came here on the beginning of, no, the end of August of last year, and then I went back to Mexico, and then I came back in February. So I think that now I'm starting to digest things in Taiwan of how things works, like not just seeing it as a foreigner. I try to interact with the artistic community, because that's the way I think I can have elements to develop series, for example. And I think that one thing that is really nice and I like about Taiwan is that it have a social standardization of wealthy, more paired than in Mexico and Latin America. Like, you don't see that big jumps that you can see in Mexico. Like, Mexico is like the VIP area and the not VIP area, and I think that's not good. That's capitalism in a really bad way. In some points, United States can be like that, but well, Mexico is like that, and I think that from the last 30 years from now, it's getting that situation more and more. I think that Taiwan, it's getting open and open and open on my perception, and it have that risk that actually can happen, that it's still in a really nice pair situation compared with other countries, compared with Mexico. But it can, when capitalism and all these like situations start to change, normally, unfortunately, if people doesn't say we have to do something about it, now it starts to have like greater gaps. And I think that, in fact, on my work, I'm developing like a dialogue with Zhao Dredron works, and because he's working with like abandoned spaces, but it's another perspective. He works with spiritualism and and I work with with economical systems, and so in some things I think that it's a different scenario, and here fortunately things are more paired, and but in other kind of things there's a lot of parallels between Mexican people and Taiwanese people, especially for people here super nice. I said like not in a shy way or a superficial way. People are super welcome, and they invite you to do things here. As Mexicans, we do. And before coming to Taiwan, I lived in Europe for some time. I live in the United States. I grew up in a private school in the United States. So, but it was my first time that I came to Taiwan last year, and I haven't seen a culture like Mexico and Taiwan that they are so open and so welcome to develop projects in parallel. And in fact, I find a lot of political scenarios that have a parallel with Mexico in different latitudes. But like the one political system and that kind of things, it can have a Taiwanese parallel, for example. And I find it really interesting, in fact, to do dialogues from what I do. And yes.
就是刚刚他的问题是问说，就是以他一个墨西哥人的角度来看台湾的社会状况，然后他说他觉得就是台湾比墨西哥好，是你没有看到一个那么明显的就是贫富的差距，可能还是有，可是没有像墨西哥这么严重。就是墨西哥有点像是资本主义走到极端的状况，然后那他现在就是有跟姚瑞忠老师在合作，就是希望能够跟他的那些文字馆的计划做一些对话，因为就是他也看到在墨西哥可能也有很多的因为石油开采之后造成的一些废墟，然后他觉得这是一件蛮有趣的事情。然后他觉得墨西哥跟台湾有个很相像的地方是，我们都很热，对，就是外国人都很热情，然后会很愿意跟他去进行一些对话，然后请他做一些计划。
Thank you very much.